Hey Grinder School, welcome. This is CodeRed Rules, and I've got hands here from the Grinder School Cash Game Series, event number 2. One we had to switch here to lock poker 4L 6 max. It turned out, I believe, to be pretty successful of a Grinder School cash game. So I've got, I think, about 15, 16 hands here. Let's go ahead and get started and see how many we can knock out in the next hour or so. Alright, so the very first hand is going to be between myself and Check Raised, who goes by Easy2CY on the forums. And now after the play was over, I wanted to make I went ahead and I told him that, like, hey, you kind of have a bet sizing tell where when you raise small, you kind of have a bluff or lower or weaker part of your hand range. When you raise big, you're definitely doing it for value. Here's an example where he is betting small, and he's definitely re-raising pocket threes here as a bluff. And I remember making a video several years ago, by this point now, a couple years ago at least, talking about good hands to 3-bet. And for the most part, it is still really relevant. And in my opinion, one of the better 3-bet guides that we have on Grinder School. Now, one of the things I did talk about, though, was 3-betting pocket threes, or small pocket pairs, 2s through 6s, and it still is a gray area for me. There's not really been a definitive argument for or against to sway my opinion, but for some reason, every time I see it, all right, I always cringe. I always think, I don't know, you know what I mean? And I think, that's kind of what. Because at the end of the hand, I went back and saw what he had. He had pocket threes, and I'm kind of like, I don't know. I think we shouldn't be folding pre-flop, and it is a difference between calling and re-raising. I've been calling a lot more recently and playing more out of position, playing the hand out of position. Just these pairs, and going from there. But it is definitely one of the hardest situations that are currently, I feel are unsolved in the game. But anyway, I don't like making it a smaller re-raise size than you would your other bluffs. You're only enticing me to call, and that's the last thing you really want, is for them to call, because what happens is the whole point of the value behind 3-bet bluff with the threes is the fact that you're playing against somebody who's raising a lot of buttons, and then 2 is folding to a lot of 3-bets. Okay. And the whole point of re-raising the threes is just the fold equity you have pre-flop. The fact is, he's raising a lot, he's folding a lot. It's straight up value 3-bet. Not value 3-bet, but it's strictly a plus AV 3-bet pre-flop just because of the math works out. That's really the only. I think I can say that now. It's really the only time I like 3-betting pocket threes compared to calling them, is when it's a clear 3-bet pre-flop for a bluff that has. You don't have to do anything post-op for it to be plus AV. And I mentioned that in the 3-bet video on where your stats have to lie in order to have 3-bets pre-flop that are completely unexploitable. And so I think the re-raising the baby pairs only when it's unexploitable is going to be the best way to do it. So, in this instance, am I unexploitable? Is this an unexploitable 3-bet? No, because of the raise size. Okay, arguably, if it wasn't for the raise size here, if he had made this 48 cents or 52 cents and went from there, then I feel like it's a lot harder for me to sit here and tell him, maybe you shouldn't be raising that. But, given I do raise up a lot pre-flop, and I definitely fold to a lot of 3-bets, and so, I think in this instance, 3-betting is okay if the raise size is there. Now, what happens is he wakes up, I have pocket jacks, right? And this is really at the time where I started thinking about is bet sizing tells, and it isn't until the end of the video that I really pinpoint it, and I think I really find it. So anyway, Easy2CY here. He flops actually a pretty good board for his hand, right? He's either got the best hand now, all right, with the pair, or he's completely, he's drawing the 2 outs. And when you're doing something like that, all right, what's going to happen is if I do have the 2 hearts here, I'm not going to call. I'm just going to raise and go all in. Okay, so he's not going to be able to see a turn card. Pretty much the only cards that I'm calling with here are the ones that I have him absolutely crushed, like in this example here. So when that's the case, you're going to want to check to me and let me bet it out. Let me decide to bluff you And that way, you know what I mean? And rather than putting in your own half pot bet here, you can check call my bet, and on the turn, you know what I mean? Instead of putting your own half pot bet in here, you can call my bet. You're putting in the same amount of money. It's just how the money's going in. If you feel like, you know what I mean, I'm bluffing you. If you feel like I'm not bluffing you, then don't call. You know what I mean? That's kind of how it is. You're not going to be getting any hands to fold here that's going to be calling the 3-bet and then putting in a whole lot of money, and especially not after people who watch this video. This half pot bets, you look like you're doing it for value, but you're not actually getting your stack in the middle at all at any point. And so, like, if you had pocket aces here, you're probably going to be looking to be building a bigger pot, so that way you can get stacks in on the river. And so that's kind of a bet sizing tell you've got, where it's kind of like, if you had the nuts, right, or if you had the hand that was probably the nuts, like pocket aces or pocket kings, you definitely would have set yourself up better. You should have set yourself up better for a stack size. So that's kind of a giveaway as well. So he checks the river, and we check behind. He checks the river, by the way, when he actually should be the one betting. I feel like, because at this point he has no chance of winning the hand. Okay, he bets on the flop and the turn when he's actually able to win the hand without betting. And right now he doesn't bet when you don't have a chance to win. So I would definitely look into this hand and see how you could have played it differently and why you should have played it differently. And that's my opinion on it. All right, let's go on to number dos. All right, so we've got a fish here under the gun limper, and he's a great player. B-Mount does the right thing and isolates him up very well. Now, here is the problem. This is only 7 minutes into the session. So it's safe to say that we have no read on this guy. These hands are from at the beginning of the entire hand, or the entire session rather. So given that we've only played for around 10 minutes, probably tops, it's tough to really say that we know this player is bad. But given the fact that he limp called pre-flop under the gun in 6 max, he's not buying in full. He probably has some kind of fishy stats for the 10 hands he hasn't played. You know what I mean? We can make these inferments that he's probably not very good. Okay, just right off the bat, even 10 hands in, you can make these things up. Okay, so on this board, obviously, at this point we know that he has a queen. But even if we don't know that, with the ace-king here, our hand is very similar to pocket twos, pocket threes, pocket fours, all these little baby pairs. Pretty much any pair less than sevens, our hand's going to be very similar to. And the only reason why I say this is because the only hands that beat us are a pair right now. Okay, we have the nut, no pair. If he doesn't have a pair, we have the best hand. Is he going to be calling us without a pair on this board? Well, he might. He's a fish. But we don't know that per se. And I would say no. In general, I would say no, he's not going to be calling us without a pair on this board. So when we bet, we're simply doing it as a bluff. When we could already be playing our hand for value. And by doing that, rather than betting it out here, trying to win the hand, because if he folds, by the way, we have the best hand. He's not holding a pair. He's only calling a pair. And there you go. I mean, he might fold twos through sixes, but I think it is safe to assume that a player of this caliber is never folding a pair on the flop. How many like unpaired cards though he's going to have? Let's say he does have twos through sixes here, and he will fold those hands to a bet. Well, think about all the other unpaired cards. He's got a 67-20. All right. Granted, we don't know he's 67-20 yet, but I'm pulling up Stove right here. All right. This is the 67-20's hand range right here. All right. 67% of hands. How much of twos through sixes does that make up? All right. Roughly what? 3%, 2% tops. Throw out take the eights out, take the queens out even. You know what I mean? We are to a point where, yeah, he's going to be folding some of his baby pairs, but look at all the other cards he doesn't have right now. You know what I mean? He's probably got some of these other eights too. All right. So we take all the eights out. We're still at over a 42% hand range. He started with 67, so 2/3 of his hands are air at this point, and that's not even doing it combinations-wise. So I'm going to take out aces and kings and jacks and tens. Okay. Still 2/3, 40% to 27% of the hands. So the majority of hands he has right now are still complete air. And I mean, that's not even assuming that like he's got all these hand ranges right now. But given percentages, all right, we can make a lot more money from the times where he doesn't have a hand, because he's not folding the eights or queens anyway, regardless if we check or if we bet. So I probably shouldn't have taken those hands out. So of all the hands he could be folding, he's never folding the queens today. All the hands he could be folding, only 2s through 6s are the ones there, and he has all those other kind of garbage combinations that he'll fold to a bet. So let's check behind and let him bet into us, okay, for the same amount. Let's just assume that, for example. All right, so we check behind. All right, he bets 25 cents into us. We're now getting value from all of his bluffs, as compared to before, where we're bluffing him. So we're completely changing up the scenario. On this turn, I definitely like a bet, regardless if we checked on the flop or not. Bet on the flop. This turn becomes an instant bet, and that's because we end up turning an additional 9 outs to our current hand, and so we're definitely showing the equity here. Definitely have the fold equity, have the value. There's a lot of reasons to bet in this turn, and so I'm glad he put the bet out there. Now, once he calls, at this point, it's time for us to give up the hand. All right, no new scare cards have come out on this board, so he's definitely have a pair of some kind, either a queen or an 8. I mean, it's I don't know how, maybe 9-10, but 9-10 just got there, so there's not really any hand he could have that we're going to assume that he's going to be folding because he's a fish, right? So, and this is the reason why, guys, we go for 3 streets of value against these bad players, is because they call and they have these crappy hands. They do all these bad things that if you don't actually go through your hands and think about it for a second, on one hand, you're checking back the river here with ace queen because you're afraid to get stacks in. On the other hand, you're willing to push these stacks all in the middle with the bluff when he's not folding. And so we should really be changing that around. I would check behind this river here. There's no new scare card. If we had, let's say we had like, I don't know, 5, 6 of hearts or something like that, just randomly, and the river was a king or an ace, yeah, bet that. That's a scare card. We could have an ace or a king. There's no reason for a 10 or a 7 to really even be a scare card. And, yeah, he's not a thinking player, but they're still afraid of cards too. They still realize that like whenever an ace comes out there, they always put you on it, or they always put you on ace king. They do silly things, and the board that comes out will still affect them. They're still gonna be thinking about that, just in a way they probably shouldn't be. All right, so we went all in, and of course he didn't fold because we have his hand in here. So definitely take a look at this situation again. And see if you can understand why I'm not wanting you to bet this flop, and then why we shouldn't be betting this river. All right, I'll go on to the next hand. So, pretty easy raise here. It's pretty standard call with the ace queen. I agree with that 3-betting in this situation, and we're out of position. We don't really need to. We probably have him beat right now. We have a small equity advantage against his hand range. Let's keep that and then play post flop. All right. Our opponent here, B Mounty, who goes by I believe Poker MJ on the forums, played his hand fine, and the reality is it's Thalili, I can't pronounce it, who actually came away with a big winner this week, ended up taking down the most. Here is the problem with his hand. It's pretty much the exact same concept with the ace king, but we have a much stronger hand right now with the king queen. Okay, so if we do bet on this flop, what hand are we representing? All right, we're representing the ace, and then possibly a bluff. Okay, so we're gonna get called here by probably any ace, any king. Maybe 10s or queens, perhaps a 9. So there's a small amount of value on this flop with us having king queen. And so when we bet out, I personally don't bet out here because I feel like there's more value in checking behind and making it look like we're afraid of this board, letting our opponent bluff. But given our opponent's hand range, he's probably not going to be betting very many turns that have us beat. So I don't necessarily mind this flop bet. It's the turn bet that I have the biggest problem with because we're still betting it out here. And what we could have done with instead, let's say we check behind the flop, right? We call the turn, call the river. We've already put in the same amount of money that we've already have so far. We give him a chance to bluff, and we see a showdown. So we're building the pot. We're value counting ourselves, I guess is the way that I used to like to put it. Value counting ourselves here because at this point the 9s have paired, so All right, that's a bad card for us. Our kicker no longer plays, so we can now we're just chopping the pot with King X, and the ace still beats us. And so this bet becomes pretty bad. All right, and the jack doesn't help us out at all. We both check behind, and so I feel like I would have checked by hack the flop, called the turn, maybe called a river bet for that last 30 cents, and that's the decision point, is the river call. Up until that point, I think it plays relatively easy. All right, let's go on to the next hand. So this is a fun one. Flyleaf goes ahead and raises up. We get that same fish here calling in position, and then easy to see why makes a very savvy squeeze play. All right, isolating this fish, and I really like the play. It's marginal. I mean, you guys don't have to be doing this. You guys can call here with a tens preflop, trying to set mine, do whatever. But trying to get heads up with this fish by three betting is a valid strategy, and I feel like it works out. Unfortunately, Thiley did have queens here, and he did the right thing too by not four betting and making sure the fish stays in the pot, because that's really where the money's gonna be made at in this situation. So anyway, board comes down pretty good for both players. The question is, how does tens play this hand? Queens has it pretty easy. I feel like they can call, they can call, they can call, they can call, or they can raise. Probably queens aren't really ever folding here. The tens, they have an option here to either check and then call a bet, right? I got check raise, check fold, or you could bet and go that route. Let's work in reverse here. Would we ever check fold this hand? No, probably not. We've got potentially 8 to 10 outs in this scenario, depending on what our opponent has. So we could very easily not. Very, very likely would not want to just check fold this hand. What we could do is we could check raise this hand, overvaluing it here. Maybe we can get a fold from a stronger hand, and that actually might be a possibility. That might not be too bad of a possibility by check raising, because what happens is we check. Finally bets out. He gets called from the fish. There's going to be like 100 big blinds in the middle. We don't need a lot of fold equity at all to make our shove to be plus EV in this situation. So maybe that's a good play. The other plays, we could bet fold. And I feel like that's kind of throwing money away too, given the fact that when we bet out, we get raised. We could potentially have a lot of equity in the hand. So it becomes like bet call, or alternative, we could now then check call as well. If it were me, I probably would check call and then check raise and then finally bet out. And our opponent did bet out here, and I don't like the bet just because we're not going to be getting that many folds. You know what I mean? We're the folds that we're getting are like ace king and ace queen kind of folds, and those aren't really the folds that we want, because we obviously have equity on that hand. We want to get stacks in the middle of those hands. We want to fold hands like queens through aces, and they're not folding, so there's not really a lot of fold equity here with the bet that we want to make. And so, additionally, I don't like this flop raise from Flyleaf here. It's too small. Go ahead and shove it in. You're obviously committed yourself at this point. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. And there's not really much, I think, easy to see what I can do here after his play so far of betting it out. So they go ahead and get stacks in, and we end up only having like a really small amount of outs, like 6 outs. Not much you could do. All right, so go on to the next hand. All right, one common theme that you're going to be seeing here in the next few hands is these suited aces. How do you guys play these suited aces? One thing we shouldn't be doing with them, though, is calling, especially when we're out of position, and especially against somebody who's going to like fold to a 3-bet. Okay, there's no reason we should be like 3-betting a really crappy hand, like Jack 10 offsuit, or even Jack 8, or any kind of hand really, and then calling this hand. We should be 3-betting this hand. Definitely 3-betting this hand as a bluff if we're going to be playing it. We're not likely to have a lot of playability post-flop out of position here. Come on, pop up his stats. And we can see very easily that our opponent raises first in the button quite a bit. All right, 36% of the time, and he's folding to a 3-bet 86% of the time. And we've already been playing at this point for about an hour. So even if you never played with him before, you probably have 100 hands on him or so. I have more because I obviously have all of his hands in my database. But you're going to see that someone who's got like a 16, 14 kind of type stats, you don't have to know very much other than the fact is, he raises a lot on the button to know that he's going to be folding to 3-bets. I mean, it's kind of a 1-to-1 correlation there. So if I'm Thwiley, I'm definitely 3-betting here, and you don't have to. I would just make it 40 cents. Make it, 10 big blinds is all you need, and you're definitely going to be. It's going to be a balanced 3-betting range. Definitely don't like calling, and we're going to see why here in a second because we're going to get pwned post flop. The 3s, by the way, is a standard call. The 3s ends up hitting the hand, and they lead out. This is fine, by the way. You could go for a check raise. I think like check raise is kind of strong. I mean, obviously it looks like it's strong. And a lot of the times you guys aren't ever really check raising as a bluff, which I have a really sick one to show you guys coming up. But for the most part, I think this is okay. Against if we had a fish playing in the hand or an unknown player, I probably would go for a check raise and try and build a pot that way on that board. But Thwiley kind of is like a weird redirection here where he bets out on the turn, and if I'm Thwiley, I believe I'm check folding this turn because there's not really any hands that I could ever put Snork on that he's betting that we're ahead of. And if we bet out here, it's like, our opponent's going to check behind. And it's kind of like, well, we don't really mind him checking behind because I think he's as likely to have a spade in his hand than he is to not have a spade in his hand. And I mean, there's not a whole lot of value in our bet here, only because we're representing that we had the flush. You know how we know that representing we have the flush is because the set of 3s is now afraid of us having the nuts, right? So we end up he ends up taming down his hand range, and we end up luck boxing hit 2 pair, but still not going to be good enough for the set. Still really afraid of us. So I think we could have saved a lot of money post flop by just folding pre or 3-betting. We end up winning the hand. And then post flop, check calling the flop is standard, and then I would just check fold the turn. Our kicker is meaningless. Okay, so in this hand, it's really strange. Easy to see why here has King Queen, and the real Santa Claus actually has King Jack. Okay, and what's so weird is first off. Pre-flop, we probably should just be folding the King Jack. Secondly, post-flop is fine here on the flop, facing this bet. Once this turn comes in, I mean, it's so strange that we were turning our hand to a bluff here by just raising it up an insane amount. Going from like 8 big blinds to 35 big blinds. I mean, we don't really need to be raising it up this much. I feel like, are we doing this for value, or are we doing this as a bluff? Now, I'm not necessarily opposed to turning May hands into bluffs on the river. Okay, if we feel like the only hand that our opponent could have here is the hand that we beat, or that beats us rather, and might fold to a raise, then we can raise the river. But at that point, or up until that point, right? If we feel like we have the best hand in this situation, we should just be calling him because there's no way a worse hand is calling this raise. There's no way. This has to be for bluff. This can't be for value. I mean, if it's for value, then it's a very, very bad raise. If it's for bluff, it totally worked, but I wouldn't be bluffing with King Jack here with top pair, no kicker, and certainly I wouldn't be calling pre-flop. If your goal is to hit top pair post-flop, then bluff your opponent off a worse hand, or a better hand, because that's kind of, it's not very good. But yeah, this is the power that a turn raise has, and that you're not getting the value as you think you are, and it's just it's so strange. It is very strange, and I'll just go on because I don't really, when I see this, it was just so confusing, like. Why? And I guess the question I would ask you is why did you do that? You know, what I mean, why are you doing this? What was going through your mind? If you were a student of mine in the situation, that's what I would ask you, fully expecting a response. I'm not trying to like berate you or, I truly want to know what you were thinking. And if you don't know what you're thinking, then like, I can't help it out. I can't help you out at all. All right, so let's go on from there. All right, so the ace queen standard raise, the queen 10 suited, very loose call out of position. I feel like we could fold it. All right, we could 3-bet as a bluff if you want to do that. But I certainly wouldn't be calling. This is a pretty big raise size too. This is a pot size raise. Take notice of Mr. Bet Size tell here of another big raise 3 with for a value hand. So definitely fold pre-bet with the queen 10 suited. We're going to get ourselves in a really crazy scenario again post flop here. I really want to know just what's going on, like what's going through you guys' minds, some kind of like crazy metagame or something like that, because this flop bet has some value to it. I'm not going to deny that. We're obviously going to get called from worse queens. We're going to get called by flush draws. We're going to get called by straight draws. We're going to get called by a lot of kings. If this were a full ring, definitely would recommend checking behind, where the ranges are a lot smaller. Given it's 6 max and he's calling with really weak hands here, we can value bet this flop. Personally, I would check it behind with 0 scare cards that I'm afraid of and let my opponent bluff into me. But if you want to value bet it out here, it's very thin. It's very thin. It would be a bet in order for us to fold though. But what we get check raised. Another guy turning his hand to a bluff here, and this has to be for bluff because it's not for value. Definitely not for value. So when that happens, right, what kind of hands here would you check raise for value? And not much adds up. You're probably raising aces and kings pre-flop. So you probably have 7s here. You could have king queen. That's probably it. And so when you are thinking about hands that you are willing to check raise bluff, and if you ever wonder why don't my bluffs ever work? How come I see all these other guys making these crazy bluffs and they always work? And it's because you're doing them at the wrong time with the wrong hands on the wrong boards. This is an example of the wrong board to do it with, because one, you can't represent that many strong hands for value. Take for example if the board was 8-7-6, all right, with 2 suits on it. What kind of hand could you represent on that board? You could represent anything. You could represent 6s, 7s, 8s, 8-7. You can represent 10-9. You could represent slow play overpair still. You could represent a lot of hands going for a check raise there, and your opponent is going to have a hard time, putting you on like a hand range of, of hand ranges of hands that he currently beats, like in the scenario here. So that's a better board for you to check raise than than this one. Secondly, we only have 5 outs at most if we are ahead. Or, I'm sorry, if we are behind, we only have 5 outs. So we need probably at least 6 or 7 in order to make any kind of like good check raise here available to us. Plus, we'd like to have some backdoor outs too, in order to make it a plus EV check raise. If we had a hand like ace jack of clubs here, that would be a nice check raise. I think of all the hands, ace jack of clubs would be the best one, because then you can represent a spade on the turn. You can keep barreling your clubs. You can have like a good your ace might be good still. You've got the gut shot. There's a lot of good cards there that come with the ace jack of clubs. So in this scenario, the check raise itself isn't very good. Now, you're supposed to get ace queen to fold. It's not happening. I probably would have folded to the check raise. I'm a nit. But again, I probably wouldn't have value bet it out, because I wouldn't really want to fold to a check raise. People check raise a lot more than they really should be at these games, and so you can take advantage of that by I'd check behind with the marginal hands, just pick off the bluffs the entire time. But we guys both ping off the queen on the turn, the money goes in, and it's all from there. The most interesting things though was the flop, and I am curious what you're thinking here on the flop check raise with the queen 10 suited. And if I'm the ace queen, You know, what I mean, I'm not really willing to put in all that much money in on the flop with our hand because it's not really that strong. All right, we can go on to the next hand here. Ooh, so this is a fun hand. B Mounty here raises it to Queen Jack offsuit, and by fun, by the way, I mean frustrating. So we get a call from 9/8 suited, and one thing you guys have to stop doing is calling these suited connectors and stuff like out of position. This is a very big leak, and you're going to find yourself in a lot of tough scenarios post flop. One, without the best hand. Two, without the initiative, and then three, just because you're calling from the blinds, you're gonna have a really hard time playing. I would probably, if I'm going to play this hand, I would 3-bet it against our opponent here. But he doesn't really raise a whole lot from the button. He raises some. He doesn't necessarily fold up to 3-bets. So I would just be folding it pre-flop and going on the next hand. Given that we have nothing, absolutely nothing now, I mean, we can just go ahead and check fold. Queen high, though, on this board, this is a classic continuation betting board. This is like the perfect one. For some reason, I think you would see bet pocket eights on this flop and then check back queen high when it should be the exact opposite. See bet queen high, check back pocket eights, and you're actually going to win a lot more money. You're going to be able to pick off bluffs. Your c bets are going to be more profitable. I mean, I can't believe this entire thing went to showdown without a single bet. All right, both of you guys can't let queen high go to showdown or 9 high. Okay. Once our opponent checks behind the flop, it's now 9 high's turn to stab at the pot, and if he has to do it twice, he does it twice, because it's obvious that the queen high has absolutely nothing or a very marginal hand, and so I mean take that cue and get your opponent to fold. The queen high, you should not be letting that go to showdown at all. Bet the flop. If you do take behind the flop, bet the turn, then bet the river. I would probably just bet the flop once and then call it a day. So, okay, let's go on the next hand. So far, standard hand here with the eights and the ace jack. This is going to follow a similar theme that I talked about earlier in this video, and I swear to God, I've talked about it on so many Grindstone Cash Game Series videos that stop turning your hands into a bluff here. You know, I mean, what hands are calling us? What hands are really folding here that we want to have folding? 2s through 7s are going to be folding. Yeah, king queen not folding. Ace queen, ace king not folding. I mean, we're getting value from those hands, right? But like you don't want. I can see into your brain right now, and what you're thinking is, I want ace queen to fold. Okay. I can almost guarantee it. That's exactly what you're thinking. Or, I want ace queen to fold. I want pocket sevens to fold. And it's kind of like, no, you don't. You want those hands to call you. You want to get value from those hands. You want to get value from every single hand that he ever has that you're ahead of here. So whenever you guys do end up having like third pair, second pair, no kicker, where you can't get value from a bet, then check and induce the bet from your opponent. Yeah, this is a pretty crappy board. It's a crappy board because like it's pretty much smacks his hand range completely. You know what I mean? Somebody who calls pre-flop, yeah, he's in the blinds, but even who doesn't hit this board? You know what I mean? Name a suited connector doesn't hit this board. Name like any two Broadway cards hit this board. This board is really bad for pocket eights. You're not going to have any fold equity on this situation, and you're not going to get any value. So your only opportunity then is to just go ahead and check call, and hopefully he checks it back, or he'll bluff into you once and then give up. And those are your only two options here. Betting and is not really an option. Check folding might be an okay one actually. If it's a really nasty board, if it's sort of like 10 Jack Queen, I'm just check folding it. I am not even going to touch it because there's no point. And I mean, we're just continuing the same kind of rabbit hole thing. If you guys keep making these really bad C bets, then excuse me, that's the reason why your red line isn't really looking that hot. You keep going to showdown with these really marginal hands, and I mean, you're in such an underdog shape right now that there's really no way for you to come back from this hand and take it down. So you're putting all this money in the hand, drawing dead, only to value ton yourself against the guy with the ace jack. And the thing is, this is something that you can completely prevent just because of the board. You know what I mean? The board itself is something that I was kind of like, just think about it for a second. Oh man, this board is one of those that my opponent could likely hit, and that's fine. You can have it. I only put in 10 cents pre-flop. I'll let you have this hand. And you don't have to try and win every hand either. All right, we can go on the next hand here. They check it back on the river. And what should have happened was Sally should have checked the flop. Ace jack bets it out on the flop. He should continue betting the turn, and then pocket ace just gives up. Because there's really, I mean, you could call the turn too, given that you have the club draw, depending on how much he bets it out. But most of the time, I'm going to be folding. Ooh, hand with pirate toes. Fun times. Okay, so B Mouncy calls pre-flop, and then check raises the flop. First off, the call pre-flop, he had queen nine of clubs, is a very, very, very loose call pre-flop. Do not make the call. If you're going to play the hand, 3-bet him as a bluff pre-flop, and you can c-bet this board rather than trying to represent a check raise. And I was going to say was if you guys see yourselves not getting a lot of value on your check raises, all right, or you like, well, man, how come all my bluffs never work? It's because of scenarios like this, right? Your bluffs never work because one, you never have any value. You never, I mean, you don't have any equity in the hand. Queen nine of clubs, you've got 4 outs. If you get called, you've got just 4 outs. What was the difference here if you had queen jack of hearts instead? Okay, queen jack of hearts, you've got 4 outs, plus you have the back door draw for 9 more outs. So you technically have around 5.5 to 6. All right, what if you had ace queen of hearts here? Well, you might have, you're going to have even more outs than that. So you have the gut shot, you have an overcard. You know, I mean, these are all things, those are all cards and boards and hands that you can be check raising. They're so much better, and they're going to be doing, you're going to do so much better with them because you're going to have more fold equity. Because you're going to be able to rep more, you can bet again on the turn a lot more often profitably with those current hands that have backdoor draws to them than if you had this hand here who's got just nothing. You've got no real reason that you can bet any turn. Pyrotos, as Sammy does self, he kind of just goes as and calls. And this turn, I mean, the turn's a really bad scare card for us. We're not fooling anybody at this point. And right now we're just kind of throwing all this good money after bad, and it's just not going to work. I feel like, I mean, so he calls your flop check raise, he's going to have something, and likelihood if he has a strong draw, he's probably going to get it all in on the flop, and he's going to like make you to fold there rather than calling the check raise. So if Sammy kind of just jams it in, and we get a fold here. So choose better hands to check raise. And I know I went over check raising in Poker 201 in one of the lectures. So give that a look-see and see what your thoughts are. All right, on the next hand. So we can go into bet sizing, tell number whatever. Number 3, number 4 here. Easy to see why. When you were out of position as a bluff, you 3-bet me to 30 cents. When you're in position for value, you re-raised me an additional 3 big blinds. So before, you raised me 7.5. Now you raise me up to full 10, if not 10.5. So this is actually the correct 3-bet size for you to be in position. You're raising it up larger, and you have a value hand. If there's ever a time to re-raise less, it's when you have position. So you can take advantage of being in position against your raiser. So here's another example of where you do have a bet sizing tell pre-flop. Okay, Pyrotos now is in a unique spot with his jacks, and no doubtably you guys have been in this situation before too, where there's a raise in front of you, a re-raise in front of you, and you're sitting there with, oh my god, what the hell? What's going on here? You're definitely ahead of my hand range, okay? But you need to be worried about the guy who 3-bet. How does your hand play against him? Okay, so you've got 2 options here. You can 4-bet, cold 4-bet, or you can call. Personally, I would call with the jacks here, and then because you could still be ahead of the guy who's three betting. That guy three betting could be complete error right now. Um, but if we called four bet, we're gonna get stacks in against a pretty mean hand range. All right, let me go ahead and load up Stove here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So against a cold four bet, I fully expect the only hands to continue are jacks and ace king or better. I would be very surprised to see ace queen come in on this cold four bet action. Right, again, that's the case. Pocket jacks only has 37% equity when we're five bet. So I don't like to four bet here with the jacks, but the queens I do. And the reason why I like the queens is because we get so much more equity. All right, we're pretty much a coin flip against the stacking off range. With the additional money in the pot here, plus throw in some fold equity for good measure. Three betting the or cold four betting the queens is slightly marginal plus EV. Okay, and if you're not sure how to play it post flop, I would probably play it post flop. I probably would call the queens too because I'm fairly confident that I'm able to play it well. If you're not confident you're gonna be able to play it well to a cold three bet like that, knowing full well the hand range that you're representing by calling. Okay, if you can play it profitably, then I would call. But if you can't, four betting cold with queens is going to be an okay play. Marginal plus EV. Four betting cold with jacks, not. So I would just call here. And then, ace kings is going to jam it in, of course, and then run it out. So if I were the jacks here, I would have called pre-flop. Myself with the fours up there would have called, so it would have been three-way. How would you have played this flop, this 10-6-3? I definitely would be check calling one bet. And that's because the guy who bets in the three opponents here is probably going to have a somewhat strong hand, but I'm not convinced yet that I'm behind. But if he decides to bet the turn as well, I'm going to be folding the jacks. So, someone who's willing to bet into two other regs gets called and then bets again, knowing full well that we're representing jacks, queens, kings, and aces. He's probably going to have either aces or kings in that scenario that we can go ahead and make the fold. Okay, so let's go on to the next hand here. Oh, man. Okay, so sevens opens pretty large from out of position only because of the dead money. That's fine. King queen suited makes the flat call. I don't like flatting king queen suited here, being so far out of position with two others left to act. Being out of position against the fish, tight under the gun opening range. There's a lot of reasons to fold king queen suited here, and I like those. Okay, we called. Ace 8 suited. I would be folding here again. These suited aces are complete garbage. They're okay to 3-bet as a bluff. I wouldn't 3-bet as a bluff here though, and that's about it. There's not really a real reason. Somebody, I believe it might have been check raised. I don't remember at this point. Was limping in suited connectors, open limping. That's what you get, open limping hands, and I don't know if I marked them or not, but don't open limp in 6 max. I mean, definitely don't do it in a GCS. It's not going to be profitable. You're going to get isolated a ton. So fold pre-bet with the ace 8 suited as well. All right, and we see flop. Now, in this situation, this is one of the very few times where pocket sevens, in my opinion, should be betting out. Okay, and the reason why I say that is because if we don't, then we're going to be losing the hand a large percentage of the time. And I'm loading up Stove while I'm doing that. Like we're going to be winning the hand more often by betting than if we were to go ahead and just check and attempt to see a showdown. And the reason why I say that is because there's going to be a lot of free cards coming. There's 4 cards that come above us that are really going to be almost there. That can come that would really kill our hand. Any 8, any queen, any king, any ace. All those hands are going to crush us. So let's go ahead and run stove here. I'm just 2 seconds away from having it ready. Okay. Don't know why ace of 8 of clubs isn't working on stove. Okay, so given the way this is now, we win exactly 50% of the time. Okay, we do win the most hands, but at the same time we also lose 50% of the time. And so if we bet out, all right, we get both of these guys to fold, we end up winning 100% of the time. And there is going to be some slight value there from the flush draw. Okay? So this is the reason why I say sometimes you can bet out 3-way or 4-way, because every time you add more cards in here, let's say the other guy's got I don't know, King Jack suited, right? We're going to be winning the most hands, but as you keep adding more players in, all right, the scare cards continue to climb, and we're going to be losing the majority of the time. And so, how do you know if you're going to be the one most, if you're likely to have the best hand? Well, you have second pair here. Likely nobody has a 10. Nobody probably has aces, kings, or queens. So I mean, you're looking like you're up against either 8s, 9s, or jacks, or a bunch of missed overcards. And so I would think that you have the best hand here. If you do get called, you're up against either a better pair or against a flush draw, and then you can play accordingly. But you need to clear up this pot and you get some people out of here in order to improve your chances of winning the hand. Once the 7s check, though, and they do check, then it's up to one of these guys now to steal the hand. Okay? I understand why Slalai would be checking, because he doesn't really know what check raise is going to do. But check raise, once it checks around to you here, you need to be betting this 100% of the time with 100% of your hand range. Doesn't matter what hand. I can't think of one hand here, not one hand that I could think of that you should be checking here. Whether it's 7s or 8s or 9s or 2s or 3s or 4s or ace king, all that, everything here, everything bets on this river, on this flop here, on the button. You should be betting everything, not one hand. All right, on the turn, not one hand. Just keep somebody, please, God, somebody bet. And this is where Filey should have really bet the river for value when he hits top pair. Good kicker. Go for value here, buddy, with the top pair. So everybody did a little bit something incorrect on this hand, and so hopefully you guys have all learned a lot on this hand alone on what you should be doing in these marginal situations. All right, we'll go on to the next hand. So I'm going to do 3 more hands here. This is the one where I was talking to you guys about where I did I was really proud of myself for a flop check raise. And, I called pre-flop with 7-6 suited. It is a loose call, but I feel like given that I can check raise post-flop fairly well and turn my hand to a bluff when I need to, I can do it. Plus, I really know how Pyrotos plays, and I feel like I could get it. We're 200 big blinds deep, and when you guys are 200 that deep, the implied odds of your hands go way up. As long as you guys aren't getting stacks in with 8th nut flushes. Okay, so we end up flopping 2 overcards, gut shot, and backdoor flush draw. If you guys are familiar with the check raise bluffing lectures, then you realize this is a really good board for us to check raise as a bluff. All right, especially we're in the big blind here. So what happens is the small blind checks, I check, Pyrotos bets out, 2/3 of the pot, relatively standard c-bet here. He could have anything from a pocket pair to he could have a 4, he could have complete air. And the same thing really with Bensel here, but of all the people so far, I am the most likely, I feel like, to hit this board because I call out position. I could have pocket 3s, I could have ace 4, maybe not. But if I throw a pretty nice sized healthy check raise out here, given that 2 people have already called, right? What's the likelihood that I'm actually bluffing here in this scenario to them at that point? And so part of being able to check raise bluff correctly is to do so in instances where they're not thinking you're going to be check raising as a bluff, and being forcing them to act, right? So let's say like Pyrotos, he doesn't know if he should call or not, even if he does have main hand, only because he's got the guy behind him left to act too. My check raise is pretty big. We're very deep, okay? It's very tough for him to play no matter what hand that he has, and so there's not a whole lot he can do at this point, and so he's just going to be like, I gotta let it go. No, if we were heads up, I'm going to have a lot less fold equity, I think, heads up than I would three-way, especially against Pyrotos. Against a normal player, it would be okay. I probably wouldn't check raise this against a heads-up opponent because it's a paired board, and check raises on paired boards statistically mean, nobody has the pair. So don't check raise on paired boards normally, but when you're in three-way pots like this, your check raise is going to look a hell of a lot stronger. And the thing is, if I get Pyrotos to fold and even Benzel decides to call, I can get a free card on the turn if I want. I can two-barrel flush. I might even hit a straight. You never know. So your check raises will win a lot more of the time when you actually have a plan here. When you have the equity to make it work. And yeah, it's going to work out. So I made it a nice healthy check raise. I didn't make it like to 50 cents. I want to make sure it's like bam, 70 cents. There's 70 cents in the pot, so it's a pot-sized check raise. I want to make sure it's like, oh man, that's a big check raise. I don't want to go over the top, but if you make a bluff larger in raise size, and it works more often, most of the time that's a more profitable raise size than making it smaller and making it work less often. So think about that for a second. All right, two more hands here, two more hands. This is going to be a classic situation where we need to be value betting like crazy against a fish. All right, you flop top pair, bet flop, bet turn, pull the trigger here. Come on, man, bet the river. The only hand that we're afraid of is a 9. He would have check raised on the turn. This river becomes a bet fold. Bet a dollar, $1.15. If he check raises us all in, if he min raises us, if he sneezes, we fold. Okay? But until that point, we have to assume we have the best hand. And so we need to be value betting these guys, especially these Microstakes, against these fish. Put that third bet in the middle. This third bet here, that's your profit. That's your hourly profit at these stakes, at this one table. If you miss this value bet, you're going to be playing for the next hour for you to make up that profit. So don't pass up the profit. That's going to be my new saying. Don't pass up the profit. All right, we've got final hand. That one was an easy one. Now, here I think is another easy one too. So Thile here has 9-8 of spades. When I have 9-8 of spades on this kind of a board, four-way, I'm like jumping up and down because I love that hand. You've got so many outs, you've got so many backdoor draws to outs. It's criminal when you don't end up hitting your hand. It really is. And there's really only one bad way to play it. Okay, only one bad way to play it. It checks around to us. We can check behind. We can take a free card if we want to. The only bad way to play it, and that's really unfortunately what happened, we raise it up, which is not optimal in my opinion. I would call, and trying to get more fish in the pot here, trying to build our pot odds, trying to build the pot. The more people that call us here in the scenario, the more the more equity we're going to have. The only bad way to play it, though, is to raise it up and then fold to the all-in. All right? And the reason why I say that is because of the money in the middle. So let's go and load up Stove again. Run you guys through this. We have 9-8 of spades. Okay? Probably can't see all of that. And our opponent actually has pocket queens. And the board is Jack of Hearts. No, I'm sorry, Jack of Spades. 8 of Hearts. Some other random spade. I don't know what that random spade was. 6 of Spades. Sorry. Doesn't really matter at that point. It kind of does. Get an extra couple of percentages here. So, click calculate. We have 48% equity against pocket queens. 48. How much do we have against pocket jacks? Just from top set. 31%. Okay, that's fine. So, best case scenario, we have 48% equity. Worst case scenario, we have 31%. What are the pot odds we're getting here? Well, there's 574 in the pot. All right, and it's $3.10 to call. No, that's not what I want to do. All right. Nah, come on. 74, 3.1, 1 divided by 2.85. We need 35% equity to make this call. Okay, so worst case scenario, we have 31% equity. Best case scenario, we have 48. Given the fact we only need 35, this is almost like a snap call. So, I mean, what we're doing is, against queens, I mean, I don't know how else to explain this, but this is a really bad fold here. And don't make this raise if you're going to be folding to the all-in. I don't make this raise, period, for one. And I would just go ahead and call and see the turn. And call your draw because you've got the equity here. Don't waste the value of your draw. Raise like, if you have a, let's say you had queen 10 of hearts, okay? And queen 10 of hearts, you've got like a lot of crazy draws there. Like you have a backdoor draw, you've got like 2 backdoor straight draws, you got an overcard. Queen 10 of hearts is a great draw to bluff on this flop. But when you have like, let's say you had 9, 10 of spades, horrible hand to bluff on this flop. 9, 7 of spades, horrible. Because you have so much equity in the hand that you might as well wait to hit your hand before getting the money in the middle. Bluff, by the way, when you miss your draw, that's when you bluff, not before you hit it. And especially don't then fold after you do raise. So, all right, guys. Hopefully this video has been informative, and I've covered a lot of hands, covered a lot of ground. Certainly, you guys are gonna have some questions. Feel free to ask them to me. These are just my opinions on these hands. Thanks for sending them in, and I'll see you guys next time at the Grindstone Cash Game Series. Talk to you later.